And so I was like, okay, what can I do with that in basketball where I'm kind of like creating anticipation and then punctuating it with like some kind of exclamation? And so you bet was kind of like an answer to a question for me. Like, is she going to hit again? You bet.
Yeah.
Can she make 6 of them? You bet.
Sometimes I really like it when you build and then they miss and you're like, no.
Yeah, you know what? This is my crews, that's their favorite thing.
It's
Their
the
favorite
best.
thing is my no.
No.
Yeah.
It's like
Exactly.
the way you say it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Bird's Eye View. Well, the WNBA finals are set, and who better to help us break it all down than one of the most dominant voices in sports broadcasting? From the NBA to the NFL, from Yankees baseball to the WNBA, Ryan Ruocco has built a reputation for bringing energy, insight, and authenticity to every game that he calls. He's become one of the league's most trusted voices, capturing the biggest stars and unforgettable moments. So before the finals tip off, we get to dive into his journey, his craft, and of course, all commentary about this year's regular season and postseason. Let's take a look at the WNBA finals odds presented by DraftKings. All right, Las Vegas Aces playing the Phoenix Mercury. The Aces are a minus 135. The Mercury are a plus 115. Man, I think Vegas is likely favored, well, a variety of reasons. They've got the MVP on their team. They have home court advantage in a 7-game series. First time it's been a 7-game series in the WNBA finals. I don't know if this goes into why the odds are what they are, but they've kind of been through it. They've had two really tough series headed into this finals. I feel like they're battle tested. They're definitely battle tested. I think for Phoenix, in order for them to overcome being this quote unquote underdog, a lot of it is going to start on the defensive end for them. That's where their bread is buttered. They do have, an MVP candidate. This year, she was a finalist in Alyssa Thomas. Satu Sabali is playing really well. So I think if Satu has some big offensive games, that can carry them through. As far as X factors go, though, it's proven to be Sammy Whitcomb. Sammy Whitcomb always gets talked about because of her shooting. She also creates a lot of chaos and causes havoc on the defensive end. And again, circling back, defense is really what gets Phoenix going. I do think Phoenix might be the best bet here given the odds. But listen, I picked Vegas before for a reason, in our last episode with those odds. So never count them out. All right. Thank you again to DraftKings. We're going to get way more in depth on the finals with Ryan later in this episode. So in lieu of Sue's view, we're actually just going to get right to the interview with Ryan. Support for Bird's Eye View comes from the all-electric Toyota BZ. What would convince you to go electric? An EPA estimated driving range rating up to 314 miles, versatile charging capability compatible with most public chargers, available premium JBL 9-speaker audio. With the all-electric Toyota BZ, you can get all of the above and more. Available all-wheel drive models with X mode and grip control give you enhanced traction, and the BZ's portable dual-voltage charging cable gives you flexibility to power up the way you want. The all-electric BZ, one drive can change your mind. Learn more at toyota.com/BZ. Toyota, let's go places. All right, Ryan. So before we talk about what we brought you here for, which is like basketball, semis, finals preview, Napheesa Collier had a press conference yesterday. So today's Wednesday, recording this on Wednesday. She had her press conference for her exit interview yesterday. And I just wanted to first talk a little bit about how we got here. I would say in large part due to Minnesota's Game 3 against Phoenix, the foul at the end, which caused an injury, Cheryl's reaction. But of course, Napheesa talks like broadly. She talks more about other issues. From your vantage point, you were literally courtside for basically everything. Like, how did we get to this point?
Yeah, I think that we've been building to this point for a while now, and by the way, Napheesa had a press conference. I totally missed that. I'm sorry.
You've been busy? What have you been doing?
No, I think that what we saw is kind of, there's been tension building, as you know, like all season. And I think it goes beyond that, but certainly all season. And I think the frustrations got to the boiling point. And, I think if just what happened at the end of game 3 happened in a vacuum, I don't think that would necessarily cause the reaction that you're seeing in the aftermath of this. I don't think Napheesa Collier's comments are a direct reaction to, what happened at the end of game 3, a non-call on the foul, which, may or may not have been the right call technically by how the rules are currently stated, right? Um, but I think it's just at this point, you've reached a boiling point for so many of the players in this league feeling a couple of things. I think one is that the way the game is currently, adjudicated on the floor is not representative of, is not the best way to highlight the skill and the talent of these players. And then I think they feel like those concerns have kind of been dismissed, and we haven't had, or they haven't had their concerns really, I think, taken as seriously as they want to. And so I think it's hit this boiling point, and that's just kind of dealing with the officiating part of it, and how we've gotten here, and the physicality on the floor, and the lack of freedom of movement. That's not dealing with everything else that Napheesa brought to the table as well. And I kind of think a couple things, right? Like, one is when someone like Napheesa Collier, who is I think a really intelligent, thoughtful leader, has thoughts like this, I think it's important to listen to them and to understand that there are definitely reasons she's coming to the microphone saying these things, and it's important to evaluate why. And then I think the other thing I think about is, unfortunately, right or wrong, throughout the history of this league, and you know this way better than me, Sue, when women in this league have wanted to try and make something happen, the only way they've kind of been able to get it done is if they do go publicly with their complaints, right? And so, I'm sure that there's a lot of things that people would like to get done behind the scenes, but that to this point has been ineffective, and so now they have to try a
Yeah, no, you
different
bring up a
tack.
great point. Well, first of all, the point you bring up about how what happened in game 3 isn't why Feast is talking about these things. Is it maybe like a tiny
Right.
catalyst? Yes, it kind of like brings it to the surface. But no, so much has been happening in our league over the last year, over the course of its history, to have a moment like that. It wasn't just because of what happened in game 3. And the second point you bring up, which is absolutely true, and I'll start by saying, because I'm in the ownership, everybody who listens to this already knows this story. Because I'm in ownership, I'm obviously in a little bit of a unique spot, and that I can't comment too much. But what I
Yeah.
can talk about is history. And history has shown that when players use their voice, change happens. And it's sad to me that it still has to be that order of events. But it also just kind of gives everybody an idea. I think for me in my walk of life, what's always so interesting, and I'm curious if this happens to you, just how much the public gets it wrong from time to time. They just
Yeah.
really don't know
Yeah.
like how our league works. I think for a long time they just mapped on what they knew about men's sports, or specifically the NBA, and just assumed it was the same for us. So, at times players have had to use their voice to really inform, really educate the public. Is that something that you come across?
Yeah, I think it's definitely unique to the WNBA compared to other sports, and I don't know, there's probably multiple reasons for that, but I definitely do think it's unique, and that's why, I look. Social media definitely makes it easy for people to, immediately fire off complaints or issues they have, right? And that's not unique to the WNBA. We've seen that from players in every sport. When they have
Mhm.
an issue with something going on at the league level, they will, voice their frustrations, via social media, right?
Mhm.
But when it's something like a prepared statement or more organized thought, or, I do think that feels a little bit more unique to the W. And I think that is because there's a history of like, hey, we've tried to tell you things, you're not doing anything about it. Now I have to go this route in order for it to kind of, become a big enough deal that you feel like it does have to be dealt with,
Mhm.
and just like to kind of pin back to the officiating thing. I thought for me the most crystallizing thing I experienced this season when it comes to the way the game is officiated came from Paige Beckers. And she said to us before a game in Indiana, she said, I've had to learn how to defend while fouling
Yeah.
again. And she said, because in college, there was such a focus for me to defend while not fouling. And here I've realized, no, I have to learn how to what I can get away with this, how to defend while fouling. And my thing is, if someone like, Paige Beckers doesn't have an agenda when she sits down and tells us that, she's genuinely reacting to the way the game is called. You famously used the line, Sue, that I played in the 90s NBA, right? Like talking about the physicality that you've dealt with in the league. So like, I'm not even blaming the officials on the floor, who I think, we all could stand to show a little more empathy for. Like, the job they have is really hard. They're under an enormous amount of scrutiny now. Kind of feels like all the attention and the negativity has cascaded down on them. I'm more kind of focused on, like, we have coaches from almost every organization now. We have like players from almost every organization saying like, hey, this is happening in our gameplay. Like, I see it with my eyes calling the games. And so, yeah, maybe you can defend by the letter of the law. Certain things are being called certain ways or not called certain ways based on how the game is currently, outlined with the rules. But I think there probably should be some level of public acknowledgement, from the league level, whether it's from as high as the commissioner's office, or whether it's from, our officiating body, or whether it's, from other places when you talk about competition committees, whatever. I think it probably would go a long way to help the conversation to just have some sort of public acknowledgement of, look, we've heard so many of the biggest voices in our game express their feelings this year about the way the game play is unfolding. And, we are going to give it a really thorough review and make sure we're working in conjunction with our partners to try and find a best path forward. And I think, for me, even if that's happening behind the scenes, I think a public statement like that might go a long way, or might have gone a long way, to kind of, mollify some of the concerns, to at least feel like, people are being heard rather than everybody's just always on the defensive.
Yeah. So you literally answered my next question as you were talking. I was like, well, what would you do, Ryan? What would you like to see happen? But I want to circle back on the Paige conversation you had, because something I do want to highlight in that, based on my own experience, is I've played now in the WNBA, or I played in the WNBA for so long. Every now and then, USA Basketball would do a college tour. Our most recent college tour was right before the pandemic. So it was like fall of 2019 into the winter of 2020. And everybody remembers this college tour because we lost to Oregon. So we'll just push that to the side for a second. But when we have to play in those college tours, we have to use, generally, it's agreed upon that we're going to use the college refs and the college rules. Now, some of the refs are the same. So some of them are, we could name the names, right? Like, some of the refs in the WNBA are the same in college, vice versa. But learning how to play with the college rules is very difficult, because now we're being told we have to have less contact. We can't hand check. So it really is, I just want to emphasize again, like, I agree with you also on the refs and having empathy and understanding. Like, I don't think it's easy. I really do see that as well. But I believe that players, we are going to play in a way, in whichever way the refs allow. And I think my experience from playing WNBA and USA Basketball, and then going to playing college rules after not being in college for 100 years, that just shows you that referees do have impact, because they clearly call it in college in a different way. And that's their mandate. And they get that mandate, from the powers that be. So that's like what is most interesting to me, that it can be changed. It really can. I'm not saying it happens overnight. This might be a very difficult question to answer, but if there was something that the referees right now in the finals could implement, is there anything, like just a certain play or a certain thing that's happening, that if you thought, if they clean that up, it could change everything?
I mean, I think there's holding and grabbing off the ball with two hands that I think and this is something that Becky Hammond has expressed to us as well. and that I think 100% could be addressed, right away when it comes to the officiating is, just if you just watch the off-ball movement, and this is an area where I think, Caitlin in so many ways has been a magnifying glass for different things that go on in this league, right, and in this sport, and I think a wonderful way. And I think we've seen a lot of fans be introduced to the league and they're watching and they're like, wait, what? You can get away with what? Like, and I think, now, you have kind of a broader understanding of what's gone on when it comes to, just off ball contact. So if I was just going to take one thing right away, to me, there's a lot of like two hands, like on people, just really stopping their movement, off the ball that I don't think is conducive to, showcasing the skill and the talent. So that would be my first thing. And then, I also think there probably has to be a conversation about, how do you invest in and develop the, best officials in the world? How do you make sure, your rules beyond just that movement, although I think like that emphasis on freedom of movement would do a lot. How do you make sure that everything is kind of showcasing the best skill? Because to your point about the college game, you adapt, right? You have those rules. That's going to make you play a certain way, right? So if in game, 1 through 5, every time, Kelsey Mitchell's running off a screen or Jackie Young is, or, Kelsey Plum or name your player, they're getting touched and whistle, well, probably the defender's gonna be like, yeah, I can't do this anymore.
Exactly.
Like I do think that like there has to be, or in my opinion, there should be some, just some acknowledgement of like, okay, maybe this has been allowed in a way that isn't going to be, best for the sport moving forward.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so that's kind of where I get caught up, not confused, but just like caught up a little bit because I just mentioned some of the refs from college, which if we're using that as maybe a less physical, better called game, some of the refs are the same. So that to me speaks to like the mandates, the rules, what's allowed. So the talent level of the ref to me is there. They can ref two different ways. But I also do agree with you that the pipeline of refs, listen, as a WNBA player, I can tell you the only thing we're ever not told like explicitly, but the things we see with our own eyes is we'll have some WNBA refs for a couple years and all of a sudden we see them in the NBA. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. The best ones in our league usually get plucked. So, it's navigating that in terms of the talent pool as well.
Which is a real thing, right? And that's kind of a women's sports thing across the board, right?
We trainers, PR people, marketing, name it.
Right.
Name it.
We talk about all the time. Mm-hmm. See it in broadcasting, right? Like where it's like, oh, this person, this person's been great in this space, whatever. Like, oh, they're on to the men. Why? Well, they're going to make more money, and so I do think that's a real thing for, that has to be considered as well. Like, what's the ways to continue to incentivize the best to be developed for this level and to be kept at this level, and that doesn't mean there are easy solutions to all this. And I also want to acknowledge it's like way easier to bring up problems than it is solutions when it comes to any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and so I totally get that. But I do think, that's another part of what has to be considered. Like what can be done to continue to invest in the best talent possible to have on the floor, and then giving them the tools to implement maybe a style that's going to be more conducive to, a little bit more movement, a little bit more freedom.
Yeah. Something to add to just the whole conversation, just put it in the pot. Players at the WNBA level, they're good, they're skilled, they're also really smart. So I do want to put that in there. Megan and I talked about this on A Touch More. Like there are certain players, I could name names. Listen, Diana Taurasi's one of them, and it's a compliment. She would ruin practice. Because if you don't have a referee with the way she plays, think about her driving, lowering her shoulder just a little, making that contact. Is that a block? Is that a charge? Did she have the right? Like, there's no way to know. And when you practice with players that play this style, you need a referee because they're that difficult. They manipulate the situation. Again, a compliment in such a way that it does make it hard. So I do want to throw that in there. But I think you bring up a good point about solutions. Like, yeah, we can all throw the problem out there over and over again.
Yes.
I don't know if I've ever told you my solution. Well, first of all, I
No.
think in this next finals, one thing I would love to see is not letting players, and we've talked about this, not letting defenses just like blow up pick and rolls, meaning run right through them. I hate that. I think that's like disingenuous, to be honest. I get why it works, but I don't love it. No, my fix is actually putting it back on the players and giving us only 5 personal fouls. I don't know why we have 6. You're going to be a lot more careful if you pick up your first foul and then your second in the first half. It just changes the whole trajectory of your game.
I think it's a great point. Like, and of course, like the initial worry is like, wait, what? They're the fouls you're so concerned about now. You want to foul out more players,
I have an answer for that.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
We play with 5 fouls in college, overseas, USA basketball. It's a 40-minute game. The only reason why we have 6 is because the NBA does, and that's a 48-minute game. They get 8 more minutes. We have 8 less minutes and 1 extra foul. It never made sense to me.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's a great consideration, and what you're saying about it makes a lot of sense to me because you're right. Like if you only have 5 to work with, you pick up one, you're going to naturally,
And my argument is always like, you don't see people fouling out left and right on these other levels where they have 5 fouls. But I've said this in competition committee meetings that I've been in, where it's like GMs, coaches, all the stakeholders. And everybody's first, their like gut reaction, knee-jerk reaction. Well, what if our stars foul out? People come to watch the stars. And I'm like, first of all, they won't. I promise you. Second of all, let's say there's 12 people, on a roster. You're giving the other team 12 more times to foul your best player. And that's the part I'm like, what are we talking about? We're not talking about your best player on defense and how they play defense. We're talking about them on offense and letting them be great on offense. I digress. That's such a great point because you're right. Having more fouls allows their offensive talent to be stopped that many more times. Yeah. I can't wait till this happens and it's called the Sue Bird rule. I've been waiting my whole life for this.
I hope it is. I really hope that it is. And I think that like, with all of this, like, I think there's a spirit that you can go about this conversation. Like even us right now, right? Like, we're not trashing the officials as we're having this conversation. We're saying like, hey,
we see that it's hard.
Yeah. Like we see it's hard and enough people have brought up that this is an issue. So like, maybe we can just start being open about solutions rather than defensive, And I think it would put the officials in a better spot as well. And so I hope it feels like there's been kind of like, a tipping point, a breaking point this year. And I don't think you can confine the conversation to, well, people are just upset that they lost because we've heard it from all over. We've heard it from coaches after wins. We've heard it from coaches after losses. We've heard it from players after wins, players after losses. It's not confined to winning and losing. It's not like sore loser moments. That's not what's bringing about this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we've already touched on so many different ways in which narratives, conversations, defensiveness, like all the things kind of come up. And that really speaks to social media, how that is, weaponized for many, those that, again, are disingenuous. Do you think the league in general, do you think like too much of the conversation around the league, I don't mean specific to a player, to a coach, to a team. I don't even mean specific to fans, media. I'm talking everybody. Is too much of the conversation happening online?
I think so, and obviously this is a societal problem beyond just the WNBA, but it does feel like it is a particular, issue in women's basketball in maybe an outsized way compared to other sports. And I was thinking of this analogy earlier. Bear with me because it's my first time breaking it out. It may not work, but like,
heard it here first.
Exactly. Yeah. A bird's eye view exclusive for analogies on, but like people always be like, oh my gosh, people are going nuts. You see how do you see the, like, oh, social media is going crazy. You see how angry people are. And it's like, would you ever look at people in a bouncy castle and be like, oh my gosh, they're bouncing. Like, do you see the way they're bouncing? Like, oh my gosh. No, you wouldn't. You know why? Because it's a bouncy castle. And it's the whole point of it is it's made to create a situation where people bounce. Okay. Well, that is what social media is.
is.
It is literally
Did you just
with
come
the
from like a 5-year-old's birthday party? Where did this bounce?
I was actually thinking of Evie's birthday party or 4-year-old birthday party, which was a few weeks ago when they were thinking of this. Yeah, I really was. But like, if you think about it, there has been endless amounts of brain science research poured in to these apps which control our narratives and our emotions and our days, right? And what have they figured out? And someone who I love listening to, Scott Galloway, talks about this all the time. They figured out the thing that sells better than anything is rage, right? So with the platform you are on is literally formatted to induce rage. It upregulates in your feed things that are going to create conflict and stir emotions up in you. And so if you're using that as like your kind of truth window into all narratives, like, I think that you're forgetting there's a massive glaze on it that is trying to create a level of controversy, and so where I think social media has been incredibly useful for women's basketball is it has become kind of like a billboard to take people to the games in a way that maybe is unique, and I think has helped grow the audience quite significantly because there is such a fervent online presence. And where I think it's hurt a little bit is it's allowed the discourse to become super toxic at times, and then for people to think like these are the only real conversations happening right now, when really it's like, well, no, these are kind of like neurologically engineered conversations that you just happen to be in the middle of.
Yeah.
And that's where I also think like it's on all of us, whether we're in the media, whether we cover the sport, whether we play the sport, whatever, or we're just consumers. Like, these companies, and this is like a broader conversation a little bit, and I know I feel this way about these things, but like, these companies, they are not going to do this for us, right? Like, unless we have some, unbelievably altruistic, multi-billionaire who is able to buy these platforms and say, "Hey, I'm going to make things right." It's really on us. We have to be our own gatekeepers when it comes to, technological intelligence, right, and media awareness, and like, we all have to just like have media literacy is really the term. We have to have some level of media literacy when we go into all of this, and use that to help inform our conversations of what's real and what's not, what should be real and what's not.
Yeah, sounds like you might run for office, like local office maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah,
May-
this could be, we could be doing a whole other
yeah.
podcast. But I totally agree. Sometimes, and this is a very like nonpartisan comment.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
the landscape of the WNBA reminds me of the political landscape we're in. And I'm just like, that
Yeah.
to me is a red flag. Like, if I feel the
Yeah.
rage, if I feel this, I'm like, put your phone down. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's always like a good telling point. Support for this show comes from DraftKings. The WNBA playoffs are here and the heat is on. Every game, every play, and every moment counts. Bet on your favorite teams and stars with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the WNBA. And for a limited time, all new DraftKings customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BIRD. That's code BIRD for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
All right, we have a lot of basketball to get into.
Yeah. Sure.
So let's get into it, Ryan. Before we get to like the playoffs, the semis, the finals, I want to do a little background on you.
Okay.
I want to do a little profile here. You started calling WNBA games in 2013. There has been a ton of growth. What's one area in your time that sticks out to you the most? Like one area of growth that sticks out the most?
Fans in the seats.
Boom.
Like I can remember, the first games I was doing, we were just like hoping you'd have a few thousand people. There were certain arenas where it was definitely better, but when I was, when I was first starting out in 2013, we weren't really talking about upper bowl anywhere. You were just hoping that you had the lower bowl sold out, or that you at least had where the cameras were going to be mostly covering like fans there. And I can even remember there were times where we would try and like see, could we, if there was only going to be, however many couple thousand fans, could we concentrate them more in the arena in order to like have it look better on camera? When I think about going to some of the early like LA Sparks games, like, just like totally barren.
Yeah.
And at what used to be Staples, and even a place like Minnesota, which has been very much ahead of the curve. When we were going to Target Center, then we weren't really talking about upper bowl. We were. It was electric, and it was just lower bowl. And so now, like, I never walk into a game wondering, "Oh, what kind of crowd are we going to get?" Vegas sells out every game. Obviously, Golden State sold out every game this year. The atmosphere at Barclays is unbelievable. Gainbridge is unbelievable. Target Center is unbelievable. I'm sure I'm forget. Phoenix is unbelievable. Seattle is unbelievable. It's hard to find. I'd never done games in Atlanta's new place. Obviously, that's they only have a few thousand people, whatever. But that atmosphere was awesome. Doing games there as well, So and the places I'm forgetting. Like there's nowhere that we do games anymore, and I say like, ugh. So like that is massive growth to me, because I just kind of assume when we go to a playoff game, it's going to be sold out, and if it's not, it's very close to being.
Yeah. When I think of kind of when you started 2013, like I said, through the next couple of years, but even before that, like I agree, there were definitely some places that were not great. And every time we played there, it was like, oh man, we're going to have to drum up our own excitement here. But always in the playoffs, they would always turn out in the playoffs. And that was really the first indicator for me that the WNBA was just lacking. I always called it a cool factor, lacking like stakes, lacking just like, oh, I want to go to this because it's cool to be at. And the playoffs are cool. People want to be a part of a playoff run. And that's why I was like, oh, we just have to tap into it. But to your point, the fan bases have really, it's been incredible to watch. What about like an on-court evolution? Like what have you seen there?
Sometimes I think like the way the like talent, people always talk about like, oh man, the talent has gotten so much better. And I actually think that sometimes that does a disservice to the talent that we've had previously, because just for example, if you look at, and that's not to say that isn't happening on like a 1 through 12 on a roster standpoint moving forward, right? And that's not going to continue to happen that way, because it always should. If the sport's going in the right direction, that is what happens. But if you look at like the top tier teams, like if I was to just like go to the 2016 WNBA finals and you were to look at LA and Minnesota's rosters, like you're talking about just like
Hall
these
of Famers.
ridiculous, yeah, exactly. Loaded, Minnesota with Whalen and Augustus and Moore and Brunson and Fowles. Like you literally have a starting lineup of Hall of Famers. And LA with Candace and NECA and Chelsea and Elena Beard, who's an unbelievable defender on that team. And I'm definitely forgetting Christy Tolliver. Yeah. Like, I mean, so like, I do think that like we've had really great top tier talent, especially on the top teams, you experience like forever. I think the biggest thing on court is like the WNBA was a little bit later to the kind of like pace and space, right? Or just the 4 out or the 5 out. And so I think like that's where I've seen the biggest differences. And because I think the league was like maybe a little bit further behind in those trends, it's why if you do it well, even if you don't have the best personnel for it yet, you still see real gains, I think, in wins and losses, like in Atlanta, for example. Like, I don't think that's, that team isn't the perfect personnel for Carl Smesko's system, but because they ran it so well, like, and the WNBA is still like, whatever, some years behind the curve and like adapting to that. Like they were the 3 seed this year, So I think like recently that's it. Like we've started to like really go towards the, paint and threes, more so than we had over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Can I tell you one of my favorite things to do when I'm watching WNBA games?
Yeah.
Every now and then in my own little head, I freeze frame it and I count the players on the court, which ones I've played against. And what's interesting, because I've had a lot of people talk to me about the talent level increasing. And I really agree with everything you're saying in that, of course, it's increased. It's evolution. Yeah. It's only going to get better and better. But when people cross the line to then put down previous generations, I get a little frustrated for obvious reasons. I think we're the only sport where that even happens. Usually you applaud previous generations. I digress. Yeah. So every now and then I'll be like, okay, who did I play against? And 9 times out of 10, it's like 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 players in the playoffs. Even there's like, I've played against pretty much everyone who's on the court yesterday, pretty much played against all of them. And that was me in my 40s. I played a long time. That was me in my 40s and I could hang, right? Like I was a good point guard. And then I think like, oh, if I was even just like 35, what would I have been? Yeah. Even 20, forget 25. And that just signals to me that the previous generations, like they would have been just as good now, right? And that really just comes back to not putting them down the way I feel like some people do. So it's just a fun little game I play with myself.
I like it. It's looking at things as like a zero-sum game versus not, and like, so, hey, in order for me to give this generation their proper flowers, I need to put down the other. No, you don't. It's not a zero-sum.
I think we're the only sport where that's happened. I cannot name another sport.
I think it happens in the NBA sometimes too.
Oh, I don't know.
But just where people will like, they might like kind of, denigrate the athleticism or,
maybe
level.
That's fine. By the way, that's fine. I shouldn't say that's fine. I'm not saying it's great, but I'm talking about like straight up trashing. Like, how good could a kid have ever been? And you're just like, what?
Yeah, right. Exactly. No. I agree with that. Like, I think there's definitely like, for some reason, there's a compulsion to, in order to like properly prop up the current generation to be like, oh yeah, by the way, everything before was trash. And it's like, no, like it wasn't, but this is also awesome. I think this real quick, last thing on that, like if the 2016, if Minnesota LA played right now in the finals, like, how much like exponentially bigger the ratings would be for that finals now than it was then, and the basketball would be exactly the same, but the ratings would be just off the charts.
Yeah. But like, just to like bring this home, I agree with you that the style of play is evolving. It is more exciting to watch now, I think. I can honestly say that compared to 10 years ago. I think that's a big help. And I do think, again, players are evolving. They're more skilled. That's more of a focus in their training. Like we never worked on skill work, but that's just the evolution of the game. And that's what makes sports exciting, right? Like what's going to be the next thing? If you look at the NBA, the great examples are what Steph Curry brought. Now everybody's trying to be like that. What James Harden brought. People are trying to be like that. So that's slowly happening in the WNBA as well. And that's what makes it exciting. Okay. When you think about all the playoffs you've covered, what are some of your favorite, you could take this anywhere, favorite games, moments, plays? What do you think about when you think about your playoff coverage?
First of all, I think about how cool it is to like crown a champion. Yeah. And I remember like when I was first starting out, before I really fully appreciated how awesome the WNBA is, like when I was just about to start the gig, one of my old bosses at the Yes Network, Woody Fryman, who's a great man, he said to me, hey, never underrate how valuable it is to call a champion. And like, it really is like, just to get to see a team through to the end, to get to like punctuate those moments, to get to be a part of the memories for the fan bases or for the highlight videos or whatever is amazing. And getting to do it for a while now, you get to accumulate a lot of awesome moments. I think if like the first game I think of, honestly, is your game against Phoenix in 2018 in the game 5 of the semifinals, because like, obviously you have this ridiculous fourth quarter and the crowd is just going nuts in Seattle. And there was like so much history on the line there in that game because it's, Diana had up to that point had never lost a winner take all game. I forget if she was like 13-0 at that
Something
time or
crazy. Yeah.
something crazy. There was like legendary players on both ends of the floor, right? Like Stewie hadn't won a championship
Mhm.
yet, right? You're kind of going for your second act of titles, if you will.
Yep.
You have BG. You have Bonner, you have Diana. On your team, you guys have Jewel as well. You had like all these great role players. The basketball was incredible. No one had ever forced a game 5 being down 2-0. Phoenix does that. You kind of knew whoever was going to get.
I'm
Yeah,
like
they
getting
wouldn't have a
stressed
breaker
as you're
nose.
like
Yeah.
detailing this.
It's funny too because
I
you
broke
forget,
my
right?
nose. It was
You broke your
oh,
nose in game 4, otherwise it might have been different. Yep. And because you guys are up 10 when you break it, I don't have to remind you. And but like that game 5 in the crowd in Seattle was just amazing. And you knew like whoever won that game was going to win against Washington in the finals that year. So yeah, that game is the first that comes to mind. Also, not to blow too much smoke, but when you call like a legend having those moments has a different feel, like when you just like for me, another one I think about is like Maya Moore's game winner at the buzzer in game 3 of the 2015 finals that I called. Like I always remember I was sick at the time,
flu
and
game.
yeah, flu game for me, yeah.
Love it.
And I had like my ears had clogged on the plane because I was congested and stuff. So, obviously, like hearing is a big part of broadcasting because of, the sounds in your ears. And I just remember being like, oh gosh, this is going to like mess up my calls today or whatever. And I remember feeling like so grateful that I was able to still like have what I felt like was a good call and like
Mhm.
getting to call that moment. That was awesome to me. Those two definitely come to mind. I think Sabrina's game winner
Oof.
uh,
Yeah.
last year. Actually, there's 2 moments from last year's finals that come to mind that are definitely in my like top 5 or 6.
Mhm.
Sabrina's game winner in game 3,
Yeah.
which is just a ridiculous shot. And every game of those finals was unbelievable on the history for New York. And then Courtney's 4-point play in
4-point play.
game 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was like that was a stunning comeback. Like it
Mhm.
was so late in the 4th quarter that they were down by 16 or whatever it was. And everybody just kind of thought like, oh, this is going to be a fait accompli for New York. They're the home team. They're meant to win this title, right? Like they never have before. They conquered the Aces.
Mhm.
That was kind of the roadblock for them. And then Minnesota comes in with this historic comeback, and Courtney
Nah.
punctuates it. Oh gosh, so good. So yeah, those are some that come to mind right
Okay.
off the bat.
Well,
Yeah.
take us through real fast. Just the you bet. Where did it come
Ah,
from? How did you come up with it?
yeah,
Maybe one of your favorite you bet calls, but where did it come from? Because you've really narrated some very special moments, and now
yeah.
you're synonymous. You are you bet.
Th Thank you, Sue. Yeah, it's why I plan to, release merchandise in the not too distant future.
Another
I
bird's eye view exclusive.
exactly. No, I think that I don't remember exactly how it started other than like what I realized was like on TV, there's a creativity you're afforded that you're not necessarily on radio as far as just like the audience is seeing what's happening, right? So I don't have to necessarily say like, you know, Bird left wing 3 is good. Like I can just say, Bird and then punctuate it with whatever, right? Like in Mike Breen's case, bang,
Mhm.
like on radio, like he could do that now, but in the beginning it might be a little bit like bang, what happens, like so, like, but on TV, you can punctuate a little bit more creatively, I would say.
Okay.
And so I had these moments where I realized I wanted to try and kind of create anticipation and then punctuate it. And Joe Buck had taught me when I was 21 about on TV creating anticipation for a moment. And he had taught me using an example in baseball where he was like, on radio, you might have to say like ground ball in the hole, backhanded by Jeter, jump throw across in time, right? Whereas on TV, you could maybe say, in the hole, Jeter has a strong arm, Reyes can really run, got him, and like there's just like a level of kind of anticipation you're able to create.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, what can I do with that in basketball where I'm kind of like creating anticipation and then punctuating it with like some kind of exclamation? And so you bet was kind of like an answer to a question for me. Like, is she going to hit again? You bet.
Yeah.
Can she make 6 of them? You bet. And so it kind of started like that for me, where it was like kind of me trying to create a question in a run up to a 3,
Okay.
or a big shot. And then the you bet was like the answer to like, oh yeah, she can, or oh yeah, he can. And then so I started using it. Like I liked it, but I was just like, I didn't really have a feel for like how often I use it, or do I use it sparingly? I was just like, oh, this is going to be my thing. I'll use it like, 8 to 10 to 12 times a game, whatever. And then Tim Corrigan, who's one of our main bosses at ESPN, said to me, he called, I'll never forget where I was. I was outside my smoothie spot near 85th and 2nd, where I used to live. And he was like, hey, I was on the phone with him, and he was like, you bet is really good. And I was like, thanks, man. And he was like, but you should be more selective in where you use it. He was like, doesn't have to be only like game winners, but it should be like to punctuate runs, or if one player is like on fire or something like that, or kind of feeling for the game. And so you're not using it, just haphazardly, like have it have meaning every time. And so that from that moment forward, I was more selective and thoughtful, so I might, in Caitlin's game back at Iowa this year, I used it on her first attempt from 3 because it felt appropriate, And then I used it also on her 37-footer because it felt appropriate later in the game, right? But I think like in game 5, I think I used it for like a jewel 3 that was big, maybe like a Jackie that was kind of like in the middle of a run, and then a Chelsea Gray 3 in overtime, So it's just kind of,
feeling it out.
as you can tell, I think a lot about this.
Honestly, I hate to say this. I'm sure this is like not going to be a popular opinion. Sometimes when I can, as you're talking about building the anticipation, that is exactly how it feels as a viewer listening to you commentate a game. Sometimes I really like it when you build and then they miss and you're like, no.
Yeah, you know what? This is like my crews. That's their favorite thing. Their favorite thing is my no. Yeah,
exactly the way you say it.
Doris tells me, she's like, when you first used to do that, I'd be like, oh, that's kind of like rude. And then she's like, now I love it.
See, it's really the only way. I think like it's something about like the tone, how you like kind of like ease into it, come out of it, that it lands softly. The no lands softly. So it's kind of the only way to do it. Yeah. Low-key, I love that.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I honestly do too. That was Van Gundy's favorite call too. He actually said to me kind of similarly something like what you just said, where he's like, I know people like you bet. My favorite call of yours is the no.
It's so funny. Oh my God.
And every once in a while too, you'll hear me do it if I like on like what I think is, sometimes I just do it on a missed shot after building up the anticipation. But sometimes if I think like it's just like a dumb shot, like sometimes I'll try and add like a little bit more of a distasteful no. Yeah. Like really that long too with 21 on the shot clock. Really?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we get to the actual basketball, very quickly, the ratings in 2024 started a trend that has since grown, can't be denied. We both agree WNBA fire was burning. Caitlin pours lighter fluid all over it. Again, this is continuing in 2025. What are some ratings factoids that you can share with us here and that people can know?
I actually, if it's all right, I wrote a few down.
Yeah,
because I thought it was good for people to know. And the way you just described that is right. Like, and this is again where people kind of would take them as like a zero-sum game, and like people would either not give Caitlin the credit she absolutely deserves, or they would act like, trends weren't going in the right direction, right? Like we never come close to the highs we've been hitting if Caitlin doesn't come along. We don't. That's a fact. Anybody who tells you otherwise is lying. Mm-hmm. Also, anybody who tells you like the ratings were, in the toilet and trends were wrong before she came along is also lying. Like a case of two things can be true. So the 2025 playoffs, up until we don't have the ratings yet for game 5 of the semis, which I'm sure did well, but we're up 11% year over year, and we're up 168% compared to 2023 thus far. We're averaging, for a playoff game right now, we're averaging 1.1 million viewers across, both the first and semifinals. Through 8 games, the semis, that's through the, both series' first 4 games, averaging 1.3 million, which is up 48% versus last year. last year's semis, and it's on pace to be the most watched semis ever, and it will be because the game 5 between Vegas and Indiana is going to do well. Even though it was on ESPN2 versus ESPN, it's going to do incredibly well because we've seen all fever games, and we've also seen, if it's a compelling game, which that was amazing, it's going to rate well. The regular season was our most watched regular season ever, across 25 regular season games, average 1.3 million, up 6% from last year's record year. Non-Indiana games, for those wondering about that, were up 30% on all ESPN networks year over year. What's so significant about this is Caitlin was hurt for a huge part of this year. And and let's be clear, Caitlin's impact is still felt, in a couple different ways. I think it's felt league-wide, regardless of whether she's playing or not. And I also think it's felt with the Fever games because a lot of Caitlin fans became Fever fans.
Yeah.
And we saw that in our ratings,
Definitely.
where even after she announced she was done for the year, we still were doing big ratings in Fever games, which we thought, because we thought maybe once people knew she's not coming back, like maybe they were watching to see, how are they going to keep the ship afloat for when she comes back? But then once she announced she wasn't, we thought, are people going to drop off? And they didn't. Now, having said that, these numbers, if she was playing, would have been even higher, right?
Right.
So to me, it's all just amazing storylines because the non-Indiana games are up 30% year over year. That's a massive, and last year we had a great year with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the Indiana games, even without her playing, were doing monster numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That leaves room for the growth that's going to happen when she does play next season, where it's going to go, right? The playoffs in general are up astronomically from historic highs last year. And I think some of it has to do with what you talk about all the time, which is the product in the league now being in this part of culture where it's stamped as cool. And so people now are like, yeah, I'm going to watch this WNBA playoff game. Come on, let's watch it.
You need to be in the know now. You need to be in the know.
Yeah, exactly. And so really there's no way to slice what's happened this season and in the playoffs other than a massive metric success.
Support for Bird's Eye View comes from the all-electric Toyota BZ. You've been thinking about going electric. You've searched the internet, admired friends' EVs, but you've been hesitant to take the plunge. The all-electric Toyota BZ might just be the electric vehicle you've been waiting for. The Toyota BZ is a battery electric vehicle designed to do more. The BZ's advanced all-electric powertrain features an EPA-estimated driving range rating up to 314 miles. All-wheel drive models have 338 horsepower and near immediate torque you can feel. And you can charge the way you want to. BZ is compatible with most public chargers. But the features don't stop there. Regenerative braking paddle shifters let you dial in the level of regenerative braking to suit your personal preference. Wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and SiriusXM seamlessly connect you to all your devices. And an available panoramic view moonroof lets you take in the scenery wherever you roam. Did I mention its striking design and sleek, powerful lines? Go from skeptic to electric in the all-electric Toyota BZ. The all-electric BZ. One drive can change your mind. Learn more at toyota.com/BZ. Toyota. Let's go places. So now we've arrived. The 2025 playoffs, they've been exceptional. You just talked about the ratings, but the play itself has been fun, captivating, dramatic. I think the only sad part, and I'll start by saying this, is the injuries. That, of course, is always a bummer, goes without saying. But as we get into this, we're going to talk specifically about the play. So we got to the semis because Vegas beats Seattle, goes to a decisive game 3. Phoenix beats New York, decisive game 3. Indiana beats Atlanta, decisive game 3. Minnesota was the only team to sweep in the first round. This is obviously, a role that the new format played, was maybe getting to these third games, but to me, it's exciting. And then we get to the semis, and we'll start with Minnesota, Phoenix. We already touched on, what I really want to focus on is game 2. You were courtside for that game. This was, I think, changed the trajectory of Phoenix's playoff run. Minnesota took game 1. We already touched on what happened in game 3, and we all know what happened in game 4. But game 2, just what did you see from Phoenix that, like I said, I really think it was just such a pivotal moment for them?
I saw something that I don't usually see from an Alyssa Thomas team early in that third quarter, and it was a team that, to me, looked like it was kind of done. And Minnesota was picking them apart. And I, like, literally at one point, my producer said in her ear, we may just have 5 more games because it looked like Minnesota just wasn't going to lose, right? And I was always a little worried about the Carrington injury because I did think that was significant for their depth.
I thought that was under discussed.
I agree.
Okay.
I think it was, especially when you realize like they didn't have a wing to come off the bench
Yeah.
then. So it was. The Carrington injury was massive. There's a reason why they went and got her, right? But they still were just the rhythm and the connectivity of their starting 5 was just, and this was like without even Carlton or Smith playing well, but just like the space and the rhythm of the offense, and then the way McBride and Courtney and Phee were playing, and they were just totally dissecting Phoenix. And if you looked at quarters 3 and 4 of game 1, and then 1 and 2 of game 2, it was like they had outscored them by like 45 or something, and it was just like it just felt like it was like
destiny.
Yeah, and I just didn't sense the spirit from Phoenix that I'm used to. Then 2 things I think happened. Alyssa Thomas gathered her team at the free throw line at one point when they were down, whatever they were down in the third quarter. It was kind of like, let's go. Like, this is not us. And then Minnesota started like really being careless with the basketball. And I just thought like, their turnovers were the jet fuel for Phoenix, because we know the Mercury, any Alyssa Thomas team is at its best when it's out in transition, off of turnovers. And they were able to turn those turnovers into points. I think it was able to spark belief back into them. And then all of a sudden they're in a close game, and they have a lot of primetime talent in the half court in a close game, and so I think what I just saw was I saw a team that was rolling, kind of have some self-inflicted wounds, a team that looked maybe done, get fueled with some belief, be reminded, oh no, you can hang. And then all of a sudden they were off to the races. And I just don't think Minnesota ever fully recovered from that. Yeah. And I think Phoenix used that to fuel them into the wins that they got, in the subsequent games.
Yeah. Something we talked about, I'm just going to mention that I think played a role. And it's just sometimes things are just unfortunate. Minnesota had 3 of their starters out heading into the fourth. And by the time they got to the table, it was around the 7:30, let's say, minute mark. And because of the gameplay, there wasn't a stoppage and they didn't get in. And it's funny because when you go rewatch it, it's not that the score changes that much from the start of the fourth to when they do get in. But I do think it plays a role on like the mental state of, I just know as a starter, when I'm checking back into a game and all of a sudden it's a, 6-point game when it was even like a 9, 10, 11-point game, you're kind of like, ooh, it just feels different after being up big in the first half even. So that was just unfortunate. But I think it changed things for Phoenix. They obviously were fueled for game 3, found a way in game 4, because it wasn't great for them in game 4 either.
No. And, I even remember at some point in the playoffs, somebody from the Mercury saying to me, we're a second half team. And we've kind of seen that, in playoffs. And I also think, Nick Uren, their GM, deserves an unbelievable amount of credit because he's built a roster that makes sense and that has usable depth in these moments. And Nate Tibbetts, I've been really impressed with him throughout these playoffs. I really have. First of all, just like one little thing, the way he uses timeouts, I think is brilliant. Okay. Like if you watch, like he always has the complement of timeouts you'd want him to have late in the game, but he also uses them. Like as soon as he's not afraid to, like, he saw a possession or two that didn't look right. Like we're talking about it now. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Real quick. You just made me think of something. What do you think it is about the makeup of Phoenix's roster and the job that Nick has done, like going out, a lot of like older rookies, right? Finding Monique Okoro-Makani. Like, what do you think this is just, man, because nobody predicted them to finish as high as they did or to get to the finals. Like, what does it communicate to you about like what the winning formula now is for this league, if anything?
Well, I think shooting off the bench, where with players that also aren't going to hurt you defensively, like
3-and-D. We've entered the
yeah,
3-and-D
exactly.
era.
Well, Kat Westbeld, for example, like metrically, she performs incredibly well as a small ball five defensively.
Wow. Okay.
And then brings the shooting that she does, and you never look at her and think like she's going to play five, like, but she can and she does. And then her shooting is translated, right? She's had a calm to her in those moments. Honestly, Megan Gustafson has had that from a shooting standpoint in these playoffs as well for Vegas, where like she's come in and just been like very calm and deliver big moments to them. But then I think the shooting off the bench with Westbeld, with Wickham, again, calm, Wickham, obviously your former teammate and veteran. And then Akoa Makani. And I think it also speaks to, in some ways, the resources and organization like Phoenix has put into finding talent in different places.
Definitely.
Right? Like, like Matt Ishbia has left no expense, no stone unturned. He's, he'll spare no expense. There's how I wanted those phrases to go. In order to do whatever he can for his team. And I think some of that manifests in how you're going to like be able to scout things internationally. And the data and analytics you're going to be able to gather from that. And Nick will be the first to tell you that it was, his assistant GMs who really found all the depth pieces we're talking about because of the work they put into that. But if you don't kind of have a setup in your front office that allows for that, then, those pieces may never be found, And so I think it's the shooting. And then I think it also speaks to the organizational resources.
No, I think it's a great point about the resources. Okay, so obviously Minnesota's revenge tour ends. Phoenix moves on. Now we're going to switch over to the other semis where Vegas was the ultimate winner. But I mean, man, this series had so many storylines. You've got all the conversation around the refs, the foul, margins, discrepancies. People are getting fined left and right. We're talking about coaches and what they're wearing and what their records are with certain outfits on. We've got South Carolina on South Carolina crime, if you will. You've got these two legendary South Carolina players just battling, and they both guarded each other really well. I mean, Aaliyah, I was really impressed with Aaliyah because Asia is no joke. Asia is no joke to guard. And so that was really impressive to watch Aaliyah do that. And then, of course, the last storyline, so we'll start there, is just the magical run that was Indiana in the playoffs.
I mean, they were so impressive. Like, if you were to, we got to remember this team went, was it 7 or 8 years? I think there was 7 years without making the playoffs. And they had Kelsey Mitchell for,
almost all of it.
A good, exactly. A good chunk of those years. For one of those years, they had Aaliyah Boston and they had Kelsey Mitchell. And so last year they get Caitlin, and especially that second half of the year, right? Things just come together. And it seems like, you get like everything just works with those three. And so if you would have said to anybody, I think going into this year, hey, Caitlin's only going to play 13 games, I think they would have said, this team's going to be lucky if they're not going to make the playoffs. Like they'll be lucky if they're sniffing the playoffs. Never mind be able to make a run to the semifinals. And I think it speaks to a few things. Like one, the growth, the stardom, the excellence of Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston, the consistency of those players, just incredible. I think the grit of Alexi Hull, who just like, I was talking with, and I was talking with Steph about it yesterday, like how she just does things you can't teach. So she just like has a knack for these winning things that you just can't teach, and you see it even with like things as simple as rebounding as a guard on the offensive end.
Every offensive rebound she gets is like a knife to the heart for the other team.
Right. And it feels like she's always like flying in from the other side of the floor to make it happen, right? And then I think Steph, like I said this on air during Game 5, but I believe it. Like the Indiana Fever front office should go tell Steph White, hey, we'll sign you to a lifetime contract right now. Like the fact that they were in that series, when you look at the rosters and who was on the floor in that series, like it's just an amazing accomplishment that they were able to push that to a Game 5. And then for Kelsey to go out in the third quarter when Vegas is up 4 and they quickly push it to 9, and you kind of just think like curtains, like, Indiana had their fun, like that's it. For them to then somehow find a way to tie that game and push it to overtime, like that, I think would have been the most implausible victory I've ever seen in the WNBA playoffs. If they would have
Pulled that off.
finished that off. Yeah. So yeah, like Indiana, I just think like it's a season where you would do nothing but celebrate, that game and that season. They should be so proud of everything they've done.
Yeah. I also think it's a story of just what vets bring to a team, that winning mentality. We can go down the list. Odyssey Sims play,
Yep.
Petty's timely threes, even Breezy Turner, not playing a lot in the regular season, coming in. These are just players that know winning basketball. We could even go to Phoenix and kind of piggyback off what we were just talking about, which I understand some of those players don't have WNBA experience, but some of those first-time rookies are still older and they've experienced the world of basketball. So I do think that plays a role. I always bring this up because sometimes, given the way our previous CBA, who knows what the future holds, has been, sometimes that vet minimum player has gotten squeezed out because of money and people go young. But it shows that you need this type of play in order to go far. Real quick, you already touched on Stephanie White. Like, she's done an absolutely incredible job this season. In particular, like strategically, what makes her and made her so effective?
I think just her ability to adapt to the personnel she has or doesn't have, like she kind of knew at certain points, she's like, I'd like to do this, this, and this. We can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like we're going to run. Like even we were talking to Becky after game 4 and she was like, they beat us with 2 plays. Like, but she was like, they were able to just keep running them effectively. She was like, they did this little like finger twist and then it was transition and that's it. And like, you kind of saw that like in game 4, like that cross screen, getting Aaliyah the ball on the block, like over and over and over again. And what I love about that is like, Steph is a brilliant coach. She has a million different sets she can orchestrate in the half court. She's like, hey, this is the personnel I got right now. This is what we have to run. We're going to do it great. And it reminds me a little bit of like what I used to be told about Bill Parcells as a kid, where it was like, hey, like this ball, you're running it, you're getting 10 yards up the middle every time. We're going to do it and do it and do it until, you can't stop it. And so I just thought like she had a great kind of like holistic view of what her roster was at every different moment she had it.
Yeah.
And was like, this is what I can get out of this now. And this is what we're going to do.
Being adaptable, I think, is number one, if not number one, like top 3 qualities that a coach has to have. You can't do the, what is it? The round peg, square hole thing and just try to jam it in. You just can't. So that's actually a huge compliment because that's not something not every coach has.
And I want to also say this about Becky, who's another incredible coach. I think what maybe she does definitely, people acknowledge and know what a great coach she is. But one thing I've thought about that, like, I don't know if she's got enough credit for this year or not. Like, to me, having a veteran team that has won before, and to have them as late in the season as they were, looking as dismal as they were, like it'd be really easy to not ever be able to get that, engine turned on properly for them. Yeah. I would think.
Or I would actually just like reword that and say, it's really hard to get those engines turned on.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's the way it felt to me. Like it would be really hard to get that switch flipped. Yep. And somehow she did. Yeah. Right. Somehow she did with this group. And now, and obviously she'd be the first to give the credit to Asia for her persistence and leadership through it. But I think when you think about, Becky and Asia as kind of that tandem, and then Jackie and Chelsea, like, it's really impressive to me that in August, they were able to turn this season around to a point where they are now playing for the finals. And even in the semis, right? Even though they clearly were the more talented team, and that would have been a really tough to stomach loss if they had lost that series. But to be able to withstand kind of the never-ending lives of the Indiana Fever, the way that they did, I think they deserve a lot of credit for that, for their resiliency as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue it's the best thing that happened to them. I thought that about the Seattle series heading into the semis. Sometimes when you go through, series like this, games like this, it only helps you if you find a way out, which they did. They found a way out of it, like to your point in the regular season, out of this like rut. They now found their way out of this Indiana series, which I totally agree. Indiana was riding emotion and it had nothing to lose. That's really hard to play against. Just to like put a bow on the semis, you already mentioned it. Asia played great throughout the semis. Had some difficulties from time to time with that Boston matchup. But then you saw Jackie Young step up when she needed to. I thought the overtime last night to finally see like Jewel and Chelsea kind of be the ones to carry the load, if you will, a little bit, was a good sign moving forward. And then you already mentioned Becky's coaching. Something Becky brought up was in that series, and I'm curious if it takes to the finals, and we're going to go to the finals now, is like our offense is fine. At one point, I think you guys were interviewing her mid-games. Like, our offense is fine.
It's all about our defense. Yeah.
We're having a problem with our defense. All right, so here we are. The finals start on Friday. Phoenix versus Las Vegas. We'll stay with Vegas first. What do they need to do defensively against Phoenix?
I think, obviously for Phoenix, their big thing is they're flat, right? Like when they do that
flat
middle
screen they set for AT. Absolutely.
For AT, and they're spread out. And we've talked with AT about this. She's never had this kind of shooting surrounding her in her career, and like that's obviously accessing her best self.
Yeah.
And so I think for Vegas, it's figuring out a way to try and contain that, to try and as much as you can. And Phoenix has shown the ability to adjust both with AT as a screener or as the handler in those moments. But I think trying to figure out how you can defend that.
Yeah.
I think the offensive key for Phoenix what we've kind of seen is as Satu's offensive production goes, so goes the Mercury. And so if I'm Vegas and I'm focusing on one thing in particular, defensively, it's like, okay, how are we going to keep Satu quiet, especially from three? We've used this stat a couple times at the end of the year, but I believe it's that Phoenix is now 23-9 this year. I think it is. Could be 20 or could be 24, but something 23-9 when Satu shoots 21% or better from three. Not just 21%. Not good.
If I'm her, I'm just doing this.
Yeah, exactly. When she shoots below, they're 4-9.
Wow.
So when they get any level of production and
outside,
any level of even a sniff of efficiency from three from her, they win.
Yeah.
And so that would be my focus if I was Vegas.
Okay. I totally agree on the flat screen. I feel like I have 3-4 ways in the back of my head that I'm like, I'm actually shocked. Teams haven't tried to do things differently. Maybe
are you going to share those?
I mean, well, you're running out of time. I'll tell you offline.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's for the next episode.
I'll share them after the finals.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but in order to execute those, you have to have a team that has worked on it, and that's always an issue in the WNBA, especially in the playoffs because the games happen so fast. But I am curious if Vegas having to play against really difficult pick and roll players like Kelsey Mitchell and Odyssey Sims, they might be two of the best guards off pick and rolls who snake. They snake that screen so well. I mean, and it puts you in all kinds of dilemmas. So maybe having to guard the pick and roll, having to be so focused on it will help Vegas in this flat screen. But they're going to have to come up with some game plans. And honestly, guarding Satu, you can I didn't know those numbers, but zero surprise that as she goes, they go a little bit. Okay, let's move over to Vegas's offense.
Yeah.
What do they need to? Who do you think might be an X factor for them? How about that?
I think Dana Evans. We were talking yesterday to Asia about okay, you and Jackie, your production is kind of given at this point. Like, who do you look at and say? And she brought up Dana Evans, and she said she's our battery, she's our fire. And all serious, we heard Stephanie White talking to us about her concerns with Dana.
Yeah, they went zone. They went zone a lot. Yeah.
They had to go zone when Dana was in the game. And I think it's significant because, how is Phoenix going to match up with that? Because you would think, Akoa Makani, her tenacity and speed defensively, she could just kind of guard Dana well. But, what if they're not, their minutes aren't matched up? How does Phoenix adjust to that? And and the other thing I think we've seen is Phoenix is going to get production out of their bench. They led the league in bench scoring this year. They have gotten consistent bench production in these playoffs. Vegas is going to need that. Obviously, they have Jewel coming off the bench, who's definitely an X factor because we know what she's capable of in her talent. Yep. But I think Dana, like I look at Dana and I say, I feel like Dana is going to have the kind of series like she had against Indiana in order for Vegas to be able to hang their bench to hang with Phoenix's bench.
Okay, I love that. All right, moving on to Phoenix. I got two more questions for you. You've already mentioned a lot about what makes Phoenix like great, what's gotten them here. What will they need to do to have success in this finals against Vegas?
Nate Tippett's, we've had several of their games in these playoffs, both series. And he very consistently, when we ask him, okay, number one key, or I like to ask coaches, all right, we're going to play fill in the blank. We will win today if blank happens. What's the blank? And he
Resilience.
said, yeah, exactly. No, he always says, he was like, if we defend with physicality.
Yeah.
And so to me, like that, it's
Isn't
not
that
just
also why he doesn't complain about the refs?
maybe.
He's the only one.
Maybe.
He's the only one.
He's the
We
only
focus
one.
on ourselves.
He's the only one. I know. I thought he took a good approach on that.
Definitely.
But especially
Sorry.
for Phoenix's purposes. For Phoenix's purposes, that was the move. But I think it's like, obviously it's the effectiveness of that defense, but I think it's also what it does for their spirit and their identity, you know? Like that, I think, is when an AT team feels like an AT team, and the Phoenix Mercury are now an AT team, you know? And like, so that means you're defending with a relentless engine and a physicality that the opponents feel. And so I think that if they can defend with that same level of tenacity and physicality, and you can see it, you can feel it. Like that's what was interesting to me about that game 2 against Minnesota. It wasn't there for 2.5 quarters.
Yeah.
It just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden when it got turned on, you can feel like you're playing 5-on-8 because of the way they're defending and their relentlessness and the way they're flying around. And so I think that's what they need.
Yeah, and that's actually circles back to why Dana Evans can be an X factor. If she can be somebody that can handle that pressure, that can maybe alleviate, give Chelsea a spell here and there, Jackie a spell here and there of having to deal with it, that can really help. We haven't really talked much about Alyssa Thomas, so very quickly, that is not because she isn't going to hasn't had major impact and won't. I mean, it's almost sad that her triple doubles feel like the norm. So obviously AT is going to have to play really well. But last question, this is the first year of the 7-game series. I'm sure your travel schedule is going to be an absolute nightmare. How do you think this is going to impact the series? And then who do you think it favors?
I think for the teams, the good thing is that Phoenix to Vegas is such a short.
Yeah, great point.
Yes. It's like it's harder for those of us who are going to try and steal some off days on the East Coast in between games.
It'll do good for your miles, though.
Yeah, exactly. It will. Fresh off the JetBlue red eye last night from Vegas. But I think that like it's maybe helpful this year that there isn't as much travel between the two cities, because I think, eventually maybe you want to get to a point where you have an extra day between games 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Like that was something I worried about a little bit last year in the finals, where we saw like one gorgeous, aesthetically pleasing style of basketball through the first 4 games. And then game 5 with those teams just like worn out. Like, now granted, game 5 was unbelievably dramatic and competitive and compelling, but the actual basketball, as Gino talked about the other day, was not the best representation, right? And
a lot of that was fatigue.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I would worry about in a game 7 with only 1 day between 6 and 7. What makes me a little less worried is like how easy the travel at least is going to be, during this series. But I think it's great, I think, the most underrated thing in ratings in sports is close games and stakes. Stars and storylines are hallmarks of what drive an audience. But what really helps to exponentially grow an audience when an event is on is when it is a really close game with something on the line. And why have we seen the ratings be so good over the playoffs thus far? We've had a lot of series go the distance, and we've had incredibly close games, and those are 2 huge factors. They're not the only factors, but they're massive factors. And so I think with this series, like, I just kind of feel like that's been a theme of these playoffs. And I would be surprised if this doesn't go at least 6. Especially it just feels like it's the first year of it going 7. It's going to go 6 or 7. It's
Yeah.
not going to end at 5. Like it just kind of feels that way.
Yeah. Do you think it favors either team in any way?
I don't. I mean, I get, the Aces play their, they have home court. So a game 7 at home, I think can play for them. I mean, I guess you could say a longer series could favor Phoenix because there's an attrition you feel from playing against them and their physicality defensively. But then again, I think there's a kind of what we saw in overtime last night from the Aces. Like there was a crazy level of execution from their veterans in overtime, and so maybe as the series gets deeper, Vegas is able to rely on that continuity with their experience to help guide them across the finish line. So I think you can make a case either way, but there's no obvious like longer series favors one for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's like a double-edged sword that exists for Phoenix, which is what you just said, right? Like the way they play defense, the aggression they have that can wear a team down. It's also what fuels their running game. But generally in the playoffs, and game 5 last year is a great example, all of a sudden in those like series ending type games, things slow down. It's much more half court. You're going to be a little more tired. So the double-edged sword is it could favor them. It also could be something that they have to manage a little bit because the way they play also tires them out. I'm sure when you play that high level defensively.
To your point, you're going to feel amazing about in those situations a Jackie or an Asia, right? Like if it's just like half court, go make something happen.
Yep.
Like, it may be more so than any other 2 players in the series.
Absolutely.
So that could favor the Aces. But I think it's going to be really compelling. 2 great coaches, 2 deep teams with like prime stars, like Asia going for number 3, AT going for number 1. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of, I think, juicy drama.
Yeah, we love juicy drama here. Ryan, I mean, fresh off a red eye, I can't thank you enough. This was amazing. I'm also so excited for the finals. We'll all be listening to you come Friday, you, Rebecca, and Holly. And I can't wait. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Always happy to go on a pod that I love listening to. So great work, my friend.
All right, there you have it. Loved that conversation with Ryan. He's a really good friend, so someone that I always like to chat basketball with. And like I mentioned in the interview, he has a courtside seat to basically everything. And not only that, he gets to talk with coaches. He gets to chat with players in shoot-arounds and in pregame interviews. So he just has an insight that's really informed, whether we're talking about a specific game, a specific moment, or really the storylines that are surrounding the WNBA. So really enjoyed that conversation. Hopefully you guys did too. Don't forget, Listener's Choice voting for the Signal Awards ends October 9th. We're nominated in the sports category. Just click the link in the description to vote and support Bird's Eye View. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your vote. This episode is a co-production of Together and Vox Media. Our producers are Tommy Alter, Jason Gallagher, Richie Bozick, Harry Krinsky, Jess Clarendon, and Melanie Carter. Support for Bird's Eye View comes from the all-electric Toyota BZ. The true test of a first-rate intellect is the ability to change one's mind. That's a quote from me. I just made it up. But it sounds good, doesn't it? So maybe it's time to revisit your thoughts on battery electric vehicles with the all-electric Toyota BZ. I've already told you about a few of its amazing features. Its EPA estimated driving range rating up to 314 miles, its versatile charging capabilities, available premium JBL 9-speaker audio system, its sleek and chiseled design. So I won't repeat myself. All I'll say is, go check it out for yourself. The all-electric BZ. One drive can change your mind. Learn more at toyota.com/BZ. Toyota. Let's go places.